My lover has amnesia. He only forgot about me. He's faking it. I didn't call him out on it. My marriage certificate turned into a divorce certificate. But 3 days later, the wedding I had met intensive care unitlessly planned for a month went on as scheduled. The groom was still him, but the bride wasn't me anymore. It had become his on-again, off-again ex-girlfriend. When we met again, he grabbed my hand in exasperation. Sophia Miller, where have you been? Why didn't you come looking for me? I pretended to look blank and asked defensively, Sir, who are you? Do we know each other? Sophia Miller, come over and get a divorce. David Harrison's words were simple and crude. I remained silent. He didn't need my answer and hung up the phone. David Harrison is my lover. He has amnesia. The first thing he did after losing his memory was to call me over for a divorce. We got our marriage certificate in the morning, and in the afternoon, it would become a divorce certificate. I arrived at City Hall and discovered that David Harrison wasn't alone. The woman intimately holding his arm was very familiar to me. She was David Harrison's ex-girlfriend, Emily Carter. She and David Harrison had been entangled in an on-again, off-again relationship for 5 years, until I came along. Now, David Harrison had forgotten me, and she was back by David Harrison's side. Seeing me, the smile on Emily Carter's face disappeared. She stammered, Ms. Miller, don't misunderstand, David and I are just. As she spoke, she didn't let go of his arm. Instead, she held on even tighter. David Harrison proactively took her hand in his, declaring his ownership. I asked Emily to come with me. Don't misunderstand. She's my girlfriend. My heart ached sharply. Meeting Emily Carter's triumphant gaze, I numbly nodded my head. Not many people were getting divorced. When processing the paperwork, the staff member glanced at me with surprise. She recognized me. David Harrison and I had just been there that morning to get our marriage certificate. She even congratulated us. May you always be of one heart and live to a ripe old age together. And here we were again in the afternoon, but this time it was for a divorce. The person holding David Harrison's arm wasn't me. It had become Emily Carter. I stood in front of them, a lonely figure. The staff member's lips moved slightly, and her suspicious gaze swept over the three of us. After a long while, she said, this doesn't comply with regulations. David Harrison frowned. He couldn't wait any longer. He made a phone call. Soon, I received an expedited divorce certificate. I clutched the booklet in my hand and gave a bitter smile. Emily Carter mentioned casually, now that you're divorced, you're not planning on freeloading at David's mansion, are you? She covered her mouth and said, sorry, I know you don't have a place to live. After all, you were husband and wife. If you want to stay for a few days, David wouldn't mind. David Harrison interrupted her, his voice devoid of emotion. Now that we're divorced, you're moving out now. His tone was cold and matter-of-fact, as if he wasn't the one pretending to have amnesia. My throat tightened instantly. The bright red divorce certificate in my hand assaulted my eyes. He was faking amnesia just for this, wasn't he? Why bother? I wasn't one to cling. If he wanted a divorce, why would I hold on to a man who didn't love me? It was laughable that my 5 years of relationship with him couldn't even get me a straightforward explanation. A marriage had ended in such an absurd way. I took a deep breath. Okay. The Mercedes-Benz that David Harrison drove was the wedding car we had chosen together. When we bought it, David Harrison said to me, on our wedding day, I'll use this car to bring my Sophia home. I hadn't even sat in this car yet. And now, the person in the passenger seat was Emily Carter. David Harrison leaned over to buckle her seatbelt. They were very close. As David Harrison straightened up, Emily Carter sweetly kissed him on the cheek. Subconsciously, David Harrison raised his eyes and glanced at me. Emily Carter followed David Harrison's gaze and saw me. She said with displeasure, "I'm sorry, this is the car David gave me. It's exclusively mine, and I don't want any other woman getting in it." David Harrison said with adoring eyes, "Whatever you say." With that, David Harrison drove off with Emily Carter. The acrid car exhaust sprayed all over my face. My nose tingled, and my eyes gradually turned red. When I took a cab there, the gates of the mansion were tightly shut. My luggage was thrown haphazardly outside the door. After knocking for a long time, Aunt Mary opened the door. She understood the confusion in my eyes and hesitated. "Miss Carter ordered me to throw these out." Emily Carter's voice came over. "Oh? Are these your things?" "Sorry, I thought it was someone's unwanted junk, so I had them all thrown out. I didn't do it on purpose." "You're not mad, are you?" Emily Carter walked out with her arms crossed, a hint of smugness in her eyes. I tugged at the corner of my lips. Miss Carter's upbringing is truly worrying. A reprimanding voice came from inside the house. "Sophia Miller, don't push your luck. Emily apologized to you, didn't she? What else do you want?" Hearing this, David Harrison walked to Emily Carter's side and looked at me with an icy expression. His gaze swept over the scattered items on the ground and scoffed, "These rags are no different from trash. Only you would value them so much." My throat choked up, and my heart suddenly clenched tightly. I couldn't say a word. He impatiently urged, "Stop talking nonsense and quickly pack up your things and leave. I don't want to see you here again." I felt the same way. There was no point in arguing with him any further. I swallowed the bitterness in my throat and silently packed my belongings. Even though I hadn't lived here for long, I had a lot of things. They filled 2 suitcases. This mansion was our marital home, David Harrison and mine. The intensive care unit's interior designed the comfortable and elegant furniture. I had personally designed and arranged everything. At that time, I thought this was the home where David Harrison and I would spend the rest of our lives together. But now, the house was still the same, but the person living in it was no longer me. Things change. I walked out carrying 2 suitcases. Emily Carter took a deep breath. "Without this trash, the air feels so much fresher." Hearing this, David Harrison instructed, "Aunt Mary, have someone clean the house from top to bottom. If there's anything else that belongs to her, throw it all in the trash." I stopped in my tracks. I tried hard to sniffle, finally suppressing the tears in my eyes. I turned my head and said to Emily Carter, "I'm giving you my unwanted trash." I randomly found an apartment and moved in. When I relaxed, I felt completely exhausted. I lay on the bed in a daze for 2 days. On the 3rd day, I received a call from my partner. I'm a wedding planner, and I opened a wedding planning company with a friend. I had planned weddings for many loving couples. And I had also spent a month intensive care unit, planning my wedding. Now, this wedding had become my illusion before it even started. When I heard those familiar words on the phone, my heart skipped a beat. I asked in a trembling voice, "Who are the bride and groom?" David Harrison and Emily Carter's names drilled into my ears. My head buzzed. Subconsciously, I refused. My partner's apprehensive voice came over, "Sophia, you know the Harrison family's power. With just one word from David Harrison, I could be left with no way out in this city." I hung up the phone and collapsed onto the bed. David Harrison was doing this on purpose. He specifically asked me to plan his wedding. I couldn't avoid it. I hurriedly tidied myself up and rushed to the wedding venue. The wedding venue was in a manor. The manor had a beautiful field of sunflowers. A gentle breeze blew, and the sunflower branches swayed in the wind, dreamlike and ethereal. I had initially decided on this wedding venue because I loved sunflowers the most. I hoped that on the most important day of my life, I could hold hands with the person I loved the most in a field of sunflowers and spend the rest of our lives together. But now, seeing this field of sunflowers again, my heart was filled with an indescribable sorrow. I suppressed the sourness and discussed the wedding arrangements with Emily Carter in a businesslike manner. She had many complaints, constantly pointing and directing me to make changes. David Harrison sat patiently by her side. His arm was around Emily Carter's waist, and his face showed not a trace of impatience. Just a few days ago, he had held me in his arms like this, patiently listening to me plan our wedding. After bothering me for 4 hours, Emily Carter said, "Forget it, let's just stick to the original plan." After all, Ms. Miller is most familiar with the original plan, and I feel reassured leaving it to Ms. Miller. I looked at the dense notes on the tablet, and my fingers clenched tightly. The original plan she was talking about was the plan I had made for my wedding. I was indeed very familiar with it. Emily Carter looked at my silent expression and gleefully curled the corners of her lips. She said casually, "The wedding will be held tomorrow afternoon. Although it's a bit rushed, I believe Ms. Miller can do her best, right?" I was stunned for a moment. My wedding with David Harrison was also originally scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. I looked up and met Emily Carter's triumphant gaze. The wedding I had met intensive care unitlessly planned for a month was now becoming Emily Carter's. It was a bit disgusting. After a long silence, I squeezed out a yes from my throat. Emily Carter snuggled up to David Harrison and said with a hidden smile, "Davi. Ms. Miller has helped us a lot. We have to give her a big gift card/cash in an envelope when we get married." David Harrison said indifferently, "This is what she's supposed to do anyway, or what else would I be paying her for?" Hearing this, Emily Carter smiled even more smugly. I pursed my lips and closed my eyes. My heart was tired, so tired that I didn't even have the strength to argue. After a long silence, I said in a low voice, "You are the customers, and the customer is always right." After they left, I breathed a sigh of relief. I didn't want to get involved with them anymore. But some shows, once they start, can't be stopped just because I want them to. I rubbed my temples. I couldn't relax yet. They left easily, leaving a pile of mess for me to clean up. Fortunately, I had been preparing for this wedding for a month. By now, I had already completed most of it, and I just needed to put the finishing touches on it. Even so, I still stayed up all night. The next day, I struggled to get out of bed. I only slept for 2 hours. But the wedding was today, and I still had a lot to take care of. When the wedding was held, I was so tired that I could barely stand up straight. I closed my eyes, feeling dizzy and lightheaded, and my steps faltered. Suddenly, someone steadied me. I opened my eyes, and it was David Harrison. Subconsciously, I pushed him away. A look of astonishment flashed across his face, and then it turned cold. "What are you standing here for? The wedding is such a mess. Aren't you going to help out?" I tugged at the corner of my lips. Money is hard to earn, and life is hard to swallow. I didn't have the energy to argue with him. I silently turned to leave, but someone called out to me. Emily Carter walked over in a gorgeous and ethereal purple wedding gown, showing off her slender waist, graceful and elegant. My gaze inevitably fell on her wedding gown. This wedding gown was originally chosen by David Harrison for me, but now, it was worn by Emily Carter. My fingers unconsciously dug into my palm, and the stinging pain tugged at the taut string in my mind. Emily Carter spun around in front of me triumphantly. Her face wore a false smile. "Ms. Miller, do you think this wedding gown is pretty? Does it match today's scene?" I couldn't say anything and just nodded haphazardly. The smile on her face grew even wider, and she looked at me with a subtle gaze. "I wonder if I could ask Ms. Miller to be our wedding MC?" The string in my mind suddenly snapped. I bit my lip, remaining silent. David Harrison said softly, "Emily, don't be intensive care unitless, she's not suitable." Emily Carter grabbed David Harrison's arm and coquettishly said, "What's not suitable?" "I believe in Ms. Miller's abilities. Ms. Miller has been in this industry for so many years. If she can't even be a wedding MC, what's the point of running a wedding planning company?" David Harrison was exasperated by her nagging and coaxed her gently, "Okay, whatever you say." He cast a cold glance at me, his tone stiff. "Ms. Miller, I'll leave the emceeing of my and Emily's wedding to you." A bitter smile tugged at the corner of my lips. "What if I don't want to?" David Harrison frowned at me, threatening. "Then I can only assume that Ms. Miller doesn't have the ability. I think a company like that does not need to survive, right?" I bit the tip of my tongue, the taste of blood spreading throughout my mouth, pushing back the lump in my throat. How embarrassing. Can't we just part on good terms? I'm not one to cling. Even without today's humiliation and anger, I would still avoid them. Why humiliate me like this? I numbly nodded my head. My steps unsteady, I brushed past them. When I walked to Emily Carter's side, I paused. I asked in a low voice, "Ms. Carter, do you really like wearing other people's hand-me-downs so much?" The words were blurted out. I didn't look at Emily Carter's gloomy face and quickly walked away. The wedding office. Ally started at 6 p.m. The sunset in the sky was fiery and bright. The afterglow fell into the field of sunflowers, dreamlike and ethereal. Emily Carter walked slowly into the sunflower field, wearing a beautiful purple wedding gown. Amidst thunderous applause, she placed her hand in David Harrison's palm. My eyes suddenly welled up with tears. This wedding was the same as the one I had. The intensive care unit was planned for a month. I had imagined it countless times in my mind. But the bride wasn't me. My love had become unrecognizable. I was like a puppet on a string, numbly reciting the prepared lines. The whole scene was filled with laughter and joy, but my heart was as still as a stagnant pool. The wedding festivities didn't end until late at night. I staggered back to my apartment. As soon as I lay down, I passed out in a daze. When I woke up again, it was to the sound of incessant ringing. My face was flushed, and the temperature of my forehead was alarmingly high. I was sick. The phone continued to ring. I struggled to sit up and groped for my phone. My vision was a little blurry, and I couldn't see the words on the screen. But that familiar voice reached my ears. I knew it was David Harrison. He was speaking in a dissatisfied tone. "Emily Carter, what's wrong with you? Can't you be more attentive? Can't you handle the trivial matters after the wedding? I can't find you anywhere." Early morning. I casually hung up the phone. I didn't have time to deal with his unreasonable troubles. I was the boss of a company, after all. There was no need for me to do everything myself. I felt terrible. I found some medicine and swallowed it haphazardly. As soon as I lay down, I fell asleep again in a daze. My dreams were a mess. Memories of David Harrison and me were interspersed in nightmares. It was like a mirror that shattered on me. The mirror was fragmented, and I was covered in wounds. I was sick for a week. In the most serious cases, I went to the hospital for 3 days of intravenous drips. When I recovered, the sunflower I had planted on the windowsill had withered. The language of sunflowers is waiting for you to love me. And my love had withered. Even the memories were only humiliation and trampling. I blacklisted David Harrison. Since he wanted to fake amnesia, I hoped he could fake it completely. It would be best if he never had any contact with me again in this lifetime. I didn't want to stay in this city. I started traveling frequently on business. The last time I returned from a business trip, it was already a month later. As I walked out of the office, a Mercedes-Benz was parked on the side of the road. A man was leaning against the car door, smoking. The smoke blurred his face. His gaze suddenly fell on me. He put out his cigarette and walked quickly towards me. It was David Harrison. Before I could avoid him, he grabbed my wrist. He asked me in exasperation, "Sophia Miller, where have you been? Why didn't you come looking for me?" I pursed my lips. I looked up, my face blank. I asked defensively, "Sir, who are you? Do we know each other?" David Harrison couldn't hide the surprise on his face. He increased the force in his hand anxiously. "Sophia Miller, what nonsense are you talking about? Don't you know who I am?" Pain came from my wrist. I frowned, my eyes cold. "Sir, please let go. This is harassment. If you don't let go, I'm calling the police." David Harrison didn't let go. His gaze fell on my face. Seeing the unfamiliarity in my eyes, his face was filled with panic and unease. He said in a trembling voice, "Sophia, I'm David Harrison. I'm your husband." I didn't believe him. In my struggle, I bit him hard. He winced in pain, but still didn't let go. I shouted, "Help!" He wanted to cover my mouth, but it was too late. Passers-by gathered around. He explained in a flustered manner, "I'm her husband. She's just throwing a tantrum with me." I pulled down his hand and shouted in a panic, "He's lying. I do. And know him." Seeing this, the onlookers pressed David Harrison down with suspicious looks on their faces. Some concerned people called the police. The police car took me and him to the police station. David Harrison is my husband. He used to be. Now, he can only be considered an ex-husband. The dates on the marriage certificate and divorce certificate were the same day. My married life with him didn't even last 24 hours. After figuring everything out, the police officers looked at David Harrison with complicated expressions. After a stern lecture, David Harrison was released. At the entrance of the police station, David Harrison's gaze was fixed on me. He asked hoarsely, "Sophia, don't you recognize me?" I took a few steps back in disgust and said indifferently, "I had a serious illness a month ago and lost a lot of memories. Should I remember you? Since I forgot, it's not important." Hearing this, David Harrison looked hurt. He opened his mouth, wanting to say something. I cut him off. "I heard you're my ex-husband. Since you can be my ex-husband, then I think there's no need for me to have any contact with you." David Harrison's expression turned panicked. "Sophia, let me explain." Emily Carter's voice interrupted, "David Harrison." Hearing this, Emily Carter quickly chased after us, her gaze full of hostility as she pierced me. She grabbed David Harrison's arm to declare her ownership and asked, "Why are you here?" I chuckled, "Are you David Harrison's wife? You should ask your husband about this, not question me, an innocent person." Emily Carter looked suspicious, but stubbornly maintained her certainty. David wouldn't be wrong. But David Harrison unusually shook off Emily Carter's hand. His gaze never fell on Emily Carter. He took a step forward, but seemed to stop in his tracks, stung by my defensive gaze. He explained in a hoarse voice, "Sophia, she's not my wife. I never got a marriage certificate with her. You're my only wife." Hearing this, Emily C. Arter's face turned completely black. She anxiously grabbed David Harrison's hand, her tone urgent, "David, let's go home, okay?" David Harrison pushed her away reflexively. Emily Carter fell to the ground, crying out in pain. She cried with tears streaming down her face, "David, it hurts." But this still didn't attract David Harrison's attention. David Harrison's gaze was fixed on me. His voice even revealed a pitiful tone, "Sophia, let me explain. I had amnesia before, so I was deceived into divorcing you, but now I remember everything. I impatiently interrupted him. I don't care. Please don't bother me. I turned to leave impatiently. David Harrison wanted to follow me. I threatened lightly, "This is the police station. Do you want to go in again?" His steps stopped. I left without looking back. Behind me was the sound of Emily Carter and David Harrison arguing fiercely. It had nothing to do with me. But David Harrison started to pester me relentlessly. He found out the address of my apartment from somewhere and pathetically guarded my door every day. As soon as I opened the door, I saw his face, and I frowned in disgust. A trace of hurt flashed in his eyes. But he persistently handed me the breakfast in his hand. It was my favorite cream-filled donut and ham and cheese omelette porridge. Looking at the packaging bag, it was from my favorite store, which was far from my apartment. But when it was handed to me, the breakfast was still steaming hot. I impatiently pushed his hand away. The breakfast in his hand fell. The bun rolled around, covered in dust. The congee spilled all over the ground, wetting my pants. I was furious. "Early morning. Can you stop causing me trouble? It's so annoying." He looked at me with a hurt expression. A small portion of the congee spilled on his hand, scalding it red. But he said humbly, "Sophia, I'm sorry." I was too lazy to listen to his explanation and slammed the door shut. After changing my clothes, I ignored David Harrison, who was guarding outside the door. He followed me like a puppy begging for attention, but the car exhaust sprayed all over his face. At noon, he persistently sent flowers and lunch. I refused them all. The delivery man called him several times, at a loss. In the end, he had no choice but to leave the flowers and lunch at the entrance of the office. It was very hot, and the lunch that had been left out for the afternoon gave off a foul smell. I held my nose and threw the spoiled lunch and the flowers that had been soaked in the smell of the spoiled lunch all afternoon into the trash can. I looked up and met his hurt gaze. I frowned tightly, and the words of reprimand blurted out, "Why are you always causing trouble for others?" David Harrison pursed his lips, and his eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of haze. I rubbed my temples in pain and said with displeasure, "David Harrison, what's the point of you doing all this? I don't remember you, and I don't want to remember you. Can you stop bothering my life?" David Harrison's face turned pale. He stood silently in place, and his eyes revealed an unspeakable sadness. After a long while, he choked up and begged, "Sophia, can you give me a chance? Give me a chance to awaken your memory. I've also had amnesia before. I know how to awaken your memory." I interrupted him faintly, "You had amnesia, and I had amnesia. It's just right. We don't owe each other anything. There's no need to recover our memories." David Harrison's throat choked up. A numb pain welled up on his face. "Sophia, are you still blaming me? I was deceived by Emily Carter into divorcing you. Can you forgive?" I impatiently emphasized, "It's not important. I don't care." His voice came to an abrupt halt. His breathing became rapid and irregular, as if the pain in his heart was unbearable. After a long silence, he said hoarsely, "Sophia, you weren't like this before. I'm a wedding planner. I've encountered all kinds of troubles, big and small. As a result, I always maintained emotional stability in front of David Harrison. The only thing that threw me into a panic was David Harrison claiming he had amnesia and asking me to divorce him. I knew he was faking it. This was his trick to make fun of me. But I still lost control. I saw a hint of smugness flash in David Harrison's eyes. He was pleased that I lost control for him. It was as if only if I were humble enough and cheap enough could I prove my love for him. How intensive care unit like? Is he still an elementary school student, relying on humiliating girls to test their love for him? This isn't love, it's blatant teasing. He doesn't deserve my forgiveness. I rejected David Harrison again and again, but he still bothered me by appearing in front of my eyes frequently. Every time I trampled on his good intentions, his face would show an indescribable sadness. But the next day, he would still be humble and try to please me. One late night, I was scrolling through food videos, my mouth watering, and I casually posted on my social media, "I'm craving something." Half an hour later, there was a knock on my door. David Harrison stood there, his forehead covered in a fine sheen of sweat. In his hand, he held the very food I had posted about. Hearing his breathless gasps, I could imagine him running around to several places late at night, finally finding what I wanted. But he didn't say a word about his trouble. He just held out the food to me, almost begging, "Sophia, didn't you say you wanted this? I got it for you." My face didn't show the happiness he expected. Instead, it was filled with disgust. I pushed his hand away, snapping, "Are you doing this on purpose? You know I'm on a diet, and you bring me high-calorie food late at night. Why do you always make things worse?" I slammed the door in his face. But then, feeling like that wasn't enough, I yanked the door open again. David's disappointed expression instantly brightened, his eyes sparkling. He asked hopefully, "Sophia, are you willing to accept my gesture?" I scoffed, "Get lost, and stop stalking my social media." I tore into him again. I closed the door, found his fake account, and blocked him. Unable to contact me, he resorted to his old tricks, camping out near my apartment and office every day. A few times, I overheard him on the phone outside my door. Emily Carter and he were having a shouting match. His office assistant was also constantly messaging him, urging him to return. He was the manager of the office. His frequent absences these days have caused several business operations to stall, resulting in significant losses for the company. The shareholders of the office were also quite critical of him. He was caught between a rock and a hard place. I thought he would back down. But he didn't. I opened the door and still saw him there. His face was gaunt, and his chin was covered with stubble. Looking closer, I could see that his eyes were bloodshot. I called the police. But after a couple of days in custody, he was back to his old ways. I sneered, a CEO of a publicly traded company, willing to be branded as a stalker. How pathetic can you be? David clenched his jawline tight. He silently conveyed his persistence. But I was tired of this pointless game. I crossed my arms and looked down at him. "Fine," I said. "What do you want to get you to give up?" Hearing this, David straightened up, his eyes gleaming. Overjoyed, he said, "Sophia, give me a chance to try and restore your memory, okay? As long as you remember everything, you'll come back to me." I gave him a long, meaningful look. "You're so sure that if I remember everything, I'll change my mind? But whether I have amnesia or not, the fact that you and I are divorced is still a fact, and the fact that you had a wedding with Emily Carter is still a fact. I don't think the me who recovers her memory will forgive you." Faced with my aggressive questioning, David subconsciously took a half-step back. His eyes darted around, avoiding my gaze. But he spoke with conviction, as if trying to hide his guilt. "Sophia, as long as you remember everything, you'll come back to me." I couldn't be bothered to expose his self-deception. "I'll give you a week," I said flatly. "If you can't make me change my mind, then stop bothering me." David pursed his lips, bargaining, "Can't you make it a month?" I frowned, annoyed. "Don't haggle with me. I don't want to waste time on you, and you're running out of time, too. If you keep pestering me, you're the one with things to lose." David bit his lip and remained silent. I reached out to close the door. He stopped me with his hand, replying, "Okay." With that, he looked at me, his eyes deep. In his eyes, longing and hope were intertwined. He took my hand and led me to every place in the city where we had left our footprints. Our first meeting was love at first sight. Because of a fleeting glance, he had deliberately tried to get close to me. Unlike those superficial playboy types, he didn't rely on money or power to pursue someone. He would carefully investigate my preferences, looking for common ground. I loved bubble tea, sweets, sunflower, my favorite games, my favorite colors, my aesthetic, and values. He found out everything. When I chatted with him, I felt like we had a lot in common and enjoyed each other's company. So I let my guard down and gradually enjoyed it. He was like a net, enveloping me completely. By the time I fell in love with him, there was no escape. During our 3 years of dating, I had noticed that he wasn't as wonderful as when we first met. But I thought that was just a normal part of being in love. And when you love someone, you constantly lower your bottom line and accept your lover with tolerance. But David's true nature was even worse than I had imagined. I listened to him rambling in my ear, telling me stories from our past. I just looked at him, my face expressionless. He looked away, not daring to meet the indifference in my eyes. As I listened, I even frowned involuntarily. The beautiful things he talked about had long been replaced in my mind by the humiliation and contempt he had shown me. I couldn't be moved at all. Faced with my indifference, his eyes gradually turned red. He opened the photo album on his phone, talking about where each photo came from. When the photos flipped to the back, they suddenly turned into photos of Emily Carter and him. He panicked and quickly put away his phone, stammering, "Sophia, But I just asked curiously, I heard Emily Carter is your ex-girlfriend. You two have been on and off for 5 years. Why don't you just be with her?" David suddenly fell silent. After a long pause, he said in a deep voice, "She's just my past, Sophia. The person I love now is you." I then asked, "But you have amnesia, and the only person you forgot was me. You chose to marry her, which means I'm not irreplaceable and that she's very important to you. In that case, why are you still holding on to me? Wouldn't it be better to be with her?" David's lips paled for a moment, and he couldn't say a word. I said lightly, "If you can forget, then what's forgotten isn't important. That goes for you, and that goes for me." I looked him straight in the eye and added softly, "Besides, amnesia is never an excuse to treat someone like trash." His breath caught, and panic spread from his eyes to his pupils. His lips moved, but his throat seemed to be hoarse. After a long while, he said in a low voice, "Sophia, there are still 3 days left. I will make you remember our past." I gave a sarcastic chuckle, not saying a word. On the 4th day, he brought the American Shorthair that had been sent to a PetSmart for boarding. The American Shorthair pounced on my feet, rubbing affectionately against my hand, not wanting to leave. I stroked its dull, withered fur, and my body suddenly stiffened. This American Shorthair was the birthday gift he had given me on my 26th birthday. A large bouquet of sunflowers hid a kitten that was only 3 months old. The kitten's appearance, poking its head out of the flowers, was so cute that it melted my heart. He held the flowers and the cat, his face full of a gentle smile. "Sophia," he said, "would you be willing to give this little cat a home?" I touched the kitten's furry little head, my voice unconsciously rising in pitch. "Little kitty, do you want to come to Aunt Mary's house?" The kitten made a weak meow. Louder than the meow was David's response, "Yes, I'm willing." He squeezed next to me, his voice filled with laughter. "The little cat is missing a dad. You don't want him to be without a father at such a young age, do you?" I understood what he meant, and my face immediately turned red. I muttered, "Dream on." But under his relentless persistence, I finally agreed to live with him. Now, David's eyes were filled with tenderness as he talked about this memory. I stroked the American short hair nestled in my lap, my expression dazed, my heart as still as water. I remembered the day David Harrison kicked me out. All I could take away was the trash in their eyes. Even this American short hair, which was his birthday gift to me. It belonged to me in name, but I couldn't take it away. A sarcastic smile tugged at the corners of my lips. I put on a stern face and began to scold him repeatedly. How could you put a cat in a sunflower? Don't you know that sunflowers are poisonous to cats? What if the cat accidentally ate it and got poisoned? Besides, who gives a living creature as a birthday gift? It's a life. The person who raises it has to take responsibility for that life. Or is a cat nothing to you? You can raise it if you want, and abandon it if you want. My barrage of accusations stunned David. He looked at me helplessly, opened his mouth, and fell silent again. I held the American short hair in my arms with pity. David gave me the cat, but I was the one who raised it. I had never had a pet before. After looking up information, I learned that cats should not be exposed to sunflowers. From then on, I kept the sunflower and the cat separate. But he didn't pay attention. So much so that now, he could still confidently bring this up in front of me. And back then, I thought David was just following the trend of giving cats online, so I took it lightly. But the bullet he fired back then hit him right between the eyebrows. I raised my eyes and questioned, since it's my cat, why did you hide it? David was speechless. I calmly continued to ask, I have amnesia, so tell me, is it my fault? Was it my fault I didn't want to continue taking care of it? David clenched his fists, his remorse and struggle seeming to make it intensive care unit for him to breathe. He looked at me helplessly. Sophia, it's my fault. It's all my fault for having amnesia and not handling these things well, making you sad. I will never make the same mistake again. I concluded lightly, amnesia is not an excuse for not taking care of a cat. I looked away, not wanting to see his pale expression. I informed him, since it's my cat, I'm taking it away. At those words, David's face instantly lit up. Sophia, I knew it, you wouldn't abandon the cat. I interrupted him rudely. Draw up a contract, you're not allowed to snatch the cat from me again. The smile on David's face froze. He murmured in distress, Sophia, why do you have to be so distant with me? I chuckled. Let me remind you, Mr. Harrison, from my point of view, you are less than a stranger to me. David stood there dumbfounded, his eyes dimming in an instant. David's face became more and more unsightly every day. On the evening of the last day, the sunset filled the sky, as magnificent as a painting. We walked to the sunflower field in the manor. The setting was so familiar. Everything here was the same as at the wedding a month ago, except there were no crowds of guests and no bride and groom holding hands. We stood in the sunflower field. A gentle breeze blew through my long black hair, and the sunflower swayed along with it. David stared at me obsessively. In the radiant sunset, he knelt in front of me. In his outstretched hand was a familiar wedding gown. 2 months ago, that wedding gown had been on my finger. But on the day he married Emily Carter, also in this sunflower field, he put that wedding gown on Emily Carter's middle finger. His figure overlapped with the figure of the groom at that wedding. He said softly, Sophia, we once planned together that our wedding would be held grandly in this sunflower field. I would take your hand, and in the spotlight, we would make promises to each other, to stay together until we grow old. He looked at me fixedly, his eyes seemingly full of unwavering affection. Sophia Miller, will you marry me? I laughed in anger and slapped him. I yelled, do you think I'm Emily Carter, who'd take any second-hand goods? He was a little stunned by my slap, his right cheek swelling up. I turned and left angrily. I didn't want to stay in this awful place any longer. He was stunned for a moment, then hurried after me. I stopped and said coldly, "Enough, it's the last day, don't bother me anymore." He grabbed my wrist in a panic. His eyes were bloodshot, and he looked pitiful. "Sophia, please, just go one last place with me?" I tugged at my wrist impatiently. He didn't let go, his eyes full of humility. "Just this last time." I said helplessly, "Fine." When the car stopped, in front of us was a familiar mansion. He hesitated. "Sophia, do you remember? This is our home." Home? 2 months ago, I was kicked out of here in a mess. My voice was firm. "This is not my home." A look of disappointment flashed across David's face. He subconsciously wanted to take my hand, but I deliberately avoided it. I said coldly, "Mr. Harrison, mind your manners." He pursed his lips and didn't speak. In the stalemate, the door was pushed open. Rom inside the mansion. Emily Carter's hair was disheveled, and her expression was haggard. But when she saw David, tears welled up in her eyes. She rushed over and hugged David excitedly. "David, you're finally back. Do you know how long I've been waiting for you at home?" "You bad man, I'm pregnant. The baby is already 4 months old. You're going to be a dad." David's expression instantly darkened. His eyes looked at me uneasily, but his hand subconsciously pushed Emily Carter away forcefully. With a thud, Emily Carter's body hit the door frame, and then she fell heavily to the ground. Emily Carter's face turned pale instantly. Her hand was on her slightly bulging abdomen, and the pain made her expression twisted. Fine beads of blood flowed from under her, crimson and glaring. She sobbed and struggled to reach out to David. "David, please save the baby in my belly." David took a step back. The expression on his face was frozen, and the tone of his voice was as cold as ice. "This child should never have existed." He turned to look at me. "Sophia, don't listen to her nonsense." I couldn't bear to watch any longer. I interrupted him. "Is now the time to say this? Hurry up and take her to the hospital." The night was thrown into chaos. Under the bright lights of the hospital, Emily Carter's face was so pale that it had no color at all. The baby in her belly was gone, and her body was also injured. It would be much more intensive care unit for her to get pregnant in the future than for ordinary people. Even if she did get pregnant, there was a high probability that she wouldn't be able to keep it. After a long while, Emily Carter moved. She raised a pair of lifeless eyes and stared at me. "It's you. It's all your fault. You caused me to lose my baby. It's all your fault." She struggled to pounce on me from the bed. I quickly took a few steps back. David immediately stood in front of me to protect me. He reprimanded sternly, "Emily Carter, haven't you made ugh trouble?" Tears rolled down Emily Carter's face in an instant. She glared at David, her eyes wide with anger. "David, she killed our baby, and I may not be able to get pregnant in the future. How can you take her side?" I pushed David away and reminded her coldly, "Miss Carter, don't make false accusations. There are security cameras at the entrance of the mansion, which record everything. If you've hit your head and gone stupid, go back and watch the surveillance footage carefully." Emily Carter choked. I warned, "if you continue to make false accusations, I can only assume that you are trying to scam me. I will file a report at the police station, and if you continue to pester me, I can sue you." Emily Carter's eyes turned red with anger. David rubbed his temples, his tone indifferent. "The child is gone, it's gone. You shouldn't have gotten pregnant with this child in the first place. This is all your fault." Emily Carter gasped. Hatred burst out from her hollow eyes. "David Harrison, I deliberately poked a hole in the condom, but if you could control your lower body, you wouldn't have gotten into bed with me." She turned her gaze to me, the corners of her mouth slightly raised. "Do you know when that was? It was the month you were preparing for the wedding gown. He had already cheated on you. Otherwise, how do you think I got pregnant?" David was furious. Shut up. He explained to me in a panic. Sophia, don't believe her. Listen to me. The baby in her belly has nothing to do with me. I don't know whose it is. She insists on framing me. I interrupted him. I don't need your explanation. At this moment, my face was calm and expressionless, as if I were watching a drama that had nothing to do with me. I said lightly, David Harrison, I don't care. Our deal is over. From now on, don't bother me anymore. I turned and left. David wanted to follow, but Emily Carter tackled him to the ground. I didn't look back. Behind me was Emily Carter's hateful sea. David Harrison, are you even human? I hate you. I hope you die a horrible death. David Harrison disappeared from my world. I opened a branch office in another city. I bought a house and settled down in that city. Occasionally, as I stroked the soft fur of the cat in my arms, I would inadvertently think of David Harrison. His life was not going well now. The company's economy was declining, and the shareholders were critical of him. He was swamped with work. What bothered him the most was that Emily Carter was pestering him. After being discharged from the hospital, Emily Carter was mentally unstable. She followed David Harrison around all day long, muttering to herself. She repeatedly said, David Harrison, how could you fall in love with another woman? It's just a breakup, isn't it? It's not the first time you've broken up with me. You'll get back together with me in a while. She sobbed, but, David Harrison, I've been waiting for you for so long. Why haven't you come back to me yet? David Harrison was extremely annoyed by her constant pestering. He had hit her, scolded her, and driven her away, but Emily Carter always managed to pester him again. As time went on, David Harrison became more and more irritable. He lost control of his emotions and beat Emily Carter half to death in public. Emily Carter had a mental illness and was exempt from responsibility. He was detained in a detention center. The video of him beating someone was circulated online. Netizens condemned him and called for him to be punished. Under the cyber violence, his past stalking and harassment of me were dug up. He angered the public again. Under the pressure of public opinion, his company's shares continued to fall. When he returned to the company, he would face the shareholders' accountability. But David Harrison was now unable to take care of himself. He had beaten Emily Carter into the intensive care unit. Emily Carter's family held him accountable and sued him in court. David Harr. Ison now had only two choices, either lose the lawsuit and be imprisoned, or take care of Emily Carter for the rest of his life under the supervision of Emily Carter's family. This incident caused a stir online for a month. When the public outcry subsided, David Harrison and Emily Carter secretly obtained a marriage certificate. He married Emily Carter, whom he didn't like. And for the rest of his life, he would have to take good care of Emily Carter, who was sometimes normal and sometimes crazy, under the supervision of Emily Carter's family. He would be haunted by Emily Carter for the rest of his life. I never thought I would meet David Harrison again. It was just by chance. He caught sight of me, his eyes filled with complex emotions. After a long while, he stopped me. Sophia, are you doing well now? I glanced at David Harrison. He was not doing well. He had gray hair, more wrinkles around his eyes, and a lifeless, depressed look on his face. I heard that he still had shares in the office, but no real power. For a man who was in the prime of his career, it was a major blow. I raised my eyebrows and ignored him. Before getting into the car, his eyes were still on me, reluctant to look away. I turned my head. He was neither too close nor too far from me, close enough for him to hear my voice. I said indifferently, my amnesia was fake, and I also know that your amnesia was fake. We're even. David Harrison's pupils dilated sharply. He wanted to rush up and question me, but he was entangled by Emily Carter, who appeared out of nowhere. I got into the car without hesitation and drove away, leaving him with nothing but car exhaust. When I was with David Harrison, I learned that he had an ex-girlfriend with whom he had been on and off for 5 years. It would be a lie to say that I didn't care. He repeatedly assured me that he would never have any contact with Emily Carter again. But in the month that I was carefully planning the wedding gown, he and Emily Carter had another encounter. On the morning after receiving our marriage certificate, I left in a hurry because of work. When I returned early, I heard unbearable sounds coming from the bedroom. It was David Harrison and Emily Carter. Like a bolt from the blue, I didn't even have the strength to push the door open. I didn't expose them. I left David Harrison a bit of dignity. Cheating was my bottom line. I couldn't stand it. But for a moment, I couldn't bring myself to say it. But David Harrison was greedy. I overheard him calling his friend. He said casually, "I regret it. I don't want to be tied down by marriage at such a young age. Besides, she doesn't seem to love me as much as Emily Carter does. Emily Carter can be willing to die for me. She's different. She's too calm, a little boring. I want to separate from her for a while, and when I figure it out, I'll go back to her." Amnesia? If I have amnesia, will she lose control of me? I want to see what she's willing to do for me. To me, "I love you, but I just realized it too late." Is that so unforgivable? I gave up arguing with her. She didn't seem to understand. When she was doing everything for River Wyndham, crazy and obsessed, the love between us was worthless. The truth wasn't what she said, that she loved me. It was just that River Wyndham didn't fulfill her fantasy of Lance Sterling, so she wanted to continue living in our marriage. I was just her safest option. No right or wrong, just stability. It was impossible for me to stay in the country for 3 months to recover from my fracture. Fortunately, my former assistant, Stacy Turner, planned to continue following me. So I got a wheelchair and prepared to leave the country another day. Willow Green didn't know this yet. On the day I was about to be discharged from the hospital, she made me a pot of fragrant chicken soup. Originally, I didn't plan to say goodbye to her, but I finally softened my attitude. I said to Stacy Turner, "Have Willow Green come over. I have something to tell her." Willow Green pushed me around the hospital. Thinking that I was starting to try to accept her, she talked a lot. But I was a little dazed. I once fantasized about a marriage where 2 people supported each other and shared their daily lives. Maybe it was like this. But at this moment, what I wanted to do was to say goodbye to her. I said, relievedly, "Willow Green, actually, on the day you said you wanted to marry me, I saw you visiting his grave." The woman's body stiffened suddenly. I smiled and continued, "Seeing your red eyes and hearing you say you wanted me to marry you, I agreed without thinking. But it's a pity that I didn't warm your heart." Willow Green choked a little. "I'm sorry." Willow Green slowly squatted down in front of me. "But Kent Edwards, you cannot accept me, but don't doubt my love for you, okay? I love you very much." Maybe, but that's not important anymore. She seemed to realize that this would be the last time we met. She just smiled bitterly. What else? Also, Willow Green, goodbye forever.